Okay, here is the chart of the moment for part one of this recording because it's going to be a ramble. So today on Reddit, someone was asking about what's the difference between all the earth signs. And so I was happy to do a ramble. And then another user wanted like a full explanation for all the signs. And so I decided to look through some of the things I've made to share before, and like apparently I made this whole PowerPoint like 9 months ago. So, lunar gestation cycles at full play here for me. And so I'm just gonna go through like a whole ramble. While I do an intro ramble, I'm gonna go through a document that you can for sure buy for $3 if you want to support me. But while I ramble, I'm going to scroll through that document and you are going to take some screenshots, okay? If you would like to financially support me and have something to show for it, you can, of course, make a purchase on my Buy Me a Coffee wish thinker. Go into the shop tab. Here's Astro Manual, Astro Basics Astro Manual, $3.11 Canadian. So, like, that's not very much to most people in the world. But otherwise, you're just going to take some screenshots here of the document, and then I'm going to go through everything in however long this ramble takes, okay? So this is just some basic information that you need to gather as a beginner. And I went through this phase of learning what's modality, what's element, what are the signs, who are the planets, what are their glyphs, what does it all look like 4 years ago, which I think is fun because when you're learning, you hear the phrase that, oh, it takes about 4 years to like get a handle on it. And here I am 4 years later, kind of ready to share that initial getting a handle on. So I am not coming to you as a teacher. I am not coming to you as a professional astrologer. I don't consult. I don't read other people's charts. I have not seen hundreds of charts. I am coming to you intermediate student to student, or whoever you are watching this. I'm here for me. I want to share what I have in my head so that it can get out of my head. And if that's helpful, then great. I would like to keep doing that. This document that you can buy, and that you're hopefully taking screenshots of right now, is the size it is and limited in the size that it is because I had originally put it up on Etsy, and Etsy has like a file size limit. So I had to like figure out what to keep and what to condense. We'll go through it. I'll have it right side up and we'll go through it. But this is just so that you can take your screenshot and have it be, as big as possible. So here is that manual right side up. And yeah, I'm going to go through everything, not in this manual, but there it is in basic. So I'm going to start with this PowerPoint I originally made in January 2025, and then never did anything with. So, and like I can see that that's when I pulled this chart to like make this PowerPoint. So I'm going to go through this, which will have a section in the middle that has like basically that workbook I just flipped through, which is this like Canva project all split up and expanded out. Like this is the information that I had to condense down into that document. So we're going to go through this together. And yeah, this is going to be kind of it's essentially a first draft of how I learned all these basics. Instead of keeping all this information in my head and in my Canva account for another 9 months while I think about it, while I workshop it, while I try and script it, I'm just going to share it with the understanding that this isn't going to be super polished and I probably will share this information again at some point. But here we are. Okay? Okay. Okay, so this is the original chart of me making this PowerPoint back in January 9 months ago. And I'm going to basically detail my first 6 months of astrological study, which was on loose leaf paper, and I was just trying to get the basics. I was trying to figure out what do these symbols each mean? How do I identify them? What do these symbols mean? What are the key word banks for all of these different symbols? And colors and situations, and how do I start to blend it into what I'm reading on Cafe Astrology, on astro.com, on astro-seek.com. So that's the very first part of learning astrology is you have to understand what the symbols mean and give some keywords to each of them so that you can start putting them together and creating more meaning, right? So the first 6 months are generally spent trying to learn planets, signs, houses, and aspects, and the symbols or glyphs for each of them and keywords for each of them. So that's what learning each of them means, and this is called the basics. So the signs are going to be on the outside, sometimes the very inside of a chart that you're looking at. They're usually taught first, as most of us grow up knowing that our sun sign, or like which horoscope to read in the paper or online. Signs always go in the same order, and each sign is a blend of an element and a modality. Each sign is also ruled by a visible planet, traditionally, and in modern times by also the far planets, but I don't work with that. I only work with the traditional rulerships. And so in tropical astrology, the zodiac signs are created by and represent the seasonal cyclic relationship Earth has to sun until light. So I'll get into that later. The houses are going to be numbered on the very inside of the ring, and the very left of the chart represents the eastern horizon, and it always begins one. One is always going to be over here, and then they go in order all the way around. Houses are the places of life. So anytime you read a horoscope and they're talking about like your finances or your partnership or your kids or like your networks or your career, they're getting those ideas of what topic of your life is activated from the house numbers. Okay? So other people in other parts or areas of life will show up in houses throughout the chart. You you are the ascendant, essentially. There's a bunch of things that contribute to you and the whole chart is you. But if we're looking at transits, if we're trying to figure out like where am I, where's my partner, where are my parents, you is the ascendant. You are the ascendant. And the entire first house. In the natural zodiac or ABC astrology, people are going to assign the first house to Aries and Aries to the first house, and I do not work with that. I did for probably the first year of learning astrology because that is just what is available online as like the default information. And I found my practice like exponentially improved when I stopped using it. So I recommend that you try and learn what the houses are without referencing any sign. What is the first house? Don't even think about Aries unless Aries is in the first house for the chart you're reading. Separately, you have to learn what Aries is without thinking about the first house. So you have to learn what Virgo is without thinking about the sixth house. Okay, you have to unzip them so that when you're trying to explain a chart to someone, you're not just telling them to refer to something else when they're learning something they're learning about. Like, oh, sixth house, well, you've got some sign there and you've got a whole bunch going on there, but let's defer to Virgo, wherever Virgo is. That is not how I do it. You can go ahead and do whatever you like, but that is not what I do. And then we look at the planets. So the planets are going to be all these little glyphs that are going to look in a different position every chart you look at. And these are the moving planets within our solar system. So we can track these planets moving against the backdrop of the constellation of the stars, as opposed to actually looking at the fixed star constellations, right? Planets rule signs. Planets travel through signs, and depending on when you were born, planets will be placed in certain houses. So what I mean is, on this day in January, sun was here all day. Doesn't matter what time of day or where in the world you were born, sun was here in Capricorn. Okay? Now, if you were born in the morning, sun in Capricorn would have been in the first house. And that would have put Mercury in Capricorn in the first house. And Pluto in Aquarius in the second house. But if you were born at noon, then Sun in Capricorn would have been in the 9th or 10th house, right? Sun in Capricorn is true just throughout the whole day, and depending when you're born is what house it will be put in. But the the planet itself is traveling through the signs. Planets moving normally through time will transit or activate other moving planets and key parts of your chart, which bring us to aspects. Aspects are the relationship between planets and points throughout the zodiac. I believe they can be best understood by understanding how signs work together and how the planets operate and by experiencing different transits over time. It's really difficult to like just theoretically get a super good handle on aspects and be able to like run with them out the gate. This is why learning astrology takes a few years, because you just have to give it time to like see how it actually works. And so the colored lines in the middle of the chart are going to represent aspects. You can also learn aspects or like check aspects because they're basically like mathematical. So we've got 12 and 13. That's right together in one sign. That's a conjunction. What else have we got here? That's really wide. Let's look for one. So we've got Neptune 27. Follow this blue line down to Mars at 28. The other thing you're going to look for if you don't want to look here is that you can look at what numbers are similar in the list. Okay, 28, 27. Are they going to talk to each other? Yeah, they're both in water signs, they're both in blue signs. That's a trine. So, like over time, you learn how to put it together without just relying on this information. Okay, so in my first 6 months, I was trying to learn all of this. So, planet isn't just the planet, it's also what does the planet rule? And then we have to learn something about essential dignities, which is part of their rulership. Where do they do well? Where do they not do well? How does that inform both planet and sign? We have to learn signs. Sign isn't just a sign, it's not just Capricorn, it's modality and element. And element isn't just element, it's not just earth. There's temperamental qualities of hot, dry, wet, and cold. Then we have to learn houses, and there's something called angularity in the houses, as well as the planetary joys, which is going to bring us something from the planets and the houses. And then we also have to learn aspects. So I cross out aspects because I feel like that is not a basic concept. I feel like there's enough basics to get along with just trying to really get an in depth knowledge of planets, signs, and houses. Aspects make it more dynamic and they bring in, like, just focusing on one planet in a sign and a house is going to give you a lot of information that you need to really work through. And then it's going to aspect some other planet in a sign and a house. And unless you have a really good understanding of each of these discrete points, how are you going to blend them together? How are you going to blend the meaning with the aspect as well as the meaning of the aspect, planet plus aspect plus planet, and whatever condition those planets are in with signs and houses? How are you going to pull that together if you don't have a really firm understanding of this stuff? So I feel like aspects are actually like more intermediate, which is why it is not super appropriate to have abject beginners like be paying lots of money or be assuming like roles of leadership and teachership when like it's a very complicated system and you're allowed to give yourself time to learn it, okay? So, in my first 6 months of trying to learn aspects, I wish I had ignored learning aspects for longer, as I find they're more easily understood when you have a better understanding of planets and elements, when you've been exposed to the thema mundi and you can track it a little bit. And aspects take you away from the point you're trying to analyze. Like, if you want to tell someone about their Mars, obviously you have to tie in the aspects to Mars. But again, if you don't have a handle on what Mars is, what the planet that's aspecting Mars is, what the signs they're in are, how are you going to put it together? There are more building blocks within signs and planets and houses that give a richer understanding to all three signs, planets, and houses, which I think makes aspects easier to integrate when you add them like afterwards. Learning squares are of the nature of Mars doesn't mean much when you don't really understand what Mars is about, right? When you haven't examined Mars not only in his own domiciles, but just as himself as well, where he has fallen detriment, all of it, right? Okay. So now we've ignored aspects, we've taken it away. In the first 6 months, trying to learn planets with their rulership and dignity, signs with a modality and element, which itself has a quality, and houses, which have angularity. That brings me to this document, which we are going to go through in more depth. And then once I got the basics down on all my loose leaf paper, I needed a way to actually work with that information and put it together in real time in some kind of structured study. So I ended up doing like a lunar situation where every first and full moon I would like do a deep dive. I would do a deep dive on where the moon was, what sign, what house that activated for me, and like get to know all the planets in there so that I could get a handle on each individual sign, more than just a theoretical knowledge. I wanted to like practice with it. And that began my astro journal journey, with my first moon journal, which is not even pictured here because it's not a fancy one. And so this, I guess, is something I had wrote up in January about things I wished I had started with. I wish I had started with whole sign house system instead of Placidus. I didn't even know Placidus was the default option. I didn't know that whole sign houses were a thing. So I wish it was more common online to see people talk about whole sign houses. And I wish more of the like stuff you just Google, I wish more of those sources and like reference materials came up with whole sign house system. But whatever it is, what it is, we all learn in quadrant and then we migrate out of it or we don't, or we migrate back. It's fine. It's totally fine. I wish I had started with traditional rulership. I began with modern rulership where Uranus rules Aquarius, Neptune rules Pisces, and Pluto rules Scorpio. And this really confused my kind of trying to deep dive the signs because there's a beautiful symmetry. It's like a perfect system with the traditional rulership. And to me, it's like the traditional planets rule the signs and the far planets rule the inner planets. So that's my opinion. Like they don't they don't care enough about us on like in the human realm, in the sublunar realm, to like rule any of it. Instead, they're lording it over all the traditional planets, which is why they hit so hard when they aspect a traditional planet. That's my opinion. So, sources dealing with tropical, Hellenistic, and traditional astrology, including no ABC or natural zodiac, including traditional planet rulership, are the Astrology Podcast with Chris Brennan. This is elite. This is what you need to go to online. I know the website got kind of compromised, and so you can find his work on Patreon, or on YouTube. I watch all the YouTube sped up times two, and then when you need to take notes, you go back and you slow it down. Particularly, you want to start with the two-part signs and the two-part houses episodes, and there's an audio episode on the traditional planets. So you're just going to watch those over and over as many times as you need to and as needed. So if you're wanting to figure out what the full moon in Taurus is going to be about, just rip through the Taurus episode. That's what I do. Kelly Surtees. Kelly is on a lot of the like formative episodes on the astrology podcast. That's how I got exposed to her. She has a free email funnel for beginners, so that's good to do if you need it or if you just want a refresher. It's a good thing to sign up for. And I've gotten a few lectures. I've paid for a few lectures. I've paid for a course, and I've never regretted it. I have regretted spending money a couple different places, never with Kelly. Gemini Brett has a lot of online stuff. He is also part of NCGR San Francisco, which is one of many astro societies that you can be a part of. They regularly have free webinars you can attend, and if you want the recordings, you can pay $10. Or you can, like, Brett is amazing, and he will teach you how the sky actually works. He will teach you, like, what is happening. And he gives, like, really rich information. So, Brett is great. Sources I recommend, in particular, these are some books that I got from the library that I liked. There's a lot of books that I did not like, so these are the ones I liked. Chani Nicholas, You Were Born for This, Natalie Wallstein, Find Your Cosmic Calling, and Jessica Lanyadoo, Astrology for Real Relationships. I got this one as an audiobook, and I just listened to the friendship and communication part, and it was great. So what I would recommend if you're not sure which house system to use, even if you want to know like between like whole sign, equal house, campanus, I don't know if I said that right, Placidus, or whole sign, figure out which signs and planets are in which houses depending on which system you're using. And if you're going through a cookbook style book like one of these where they just detail like little tidbits about each placement, you're going to write down the notes for each of those placements. You know, like I've got Sun in Aquarius in the fourth house in whole sign, and in third house in Placidus. So I wrote down the notes for both from this source and from this source, and I listened to both for this source. And which one felt more like me? Which one did I have to argue with less? Which one was more like, oh no, that is for sure me. It was whole sign. So that's how I landed on wanting to use whole sign. So if you do that exercise and you realize that, equal house really just makes everything pop. There's no arguing. It's unambiguous. It's clearly you. That's how you know you should use equal house, right? Okay. And then this, I guess, was the end of my PowerPoint. And I have all these lovely little things here. So I've got, if you want to help support me, please do so. I soft quit my job. I'm just doing this now. I'm not making money here. I'm just having fun. So let's keep this hermit home, okay? Your support is invaluable. Okay. So this Astro Manual doesn't have aspects in it. It's about signs, qualities, and planets. Qualities are going to affect signs and planets, okay? We've got some stuff about houses in here as well. So here's the signs, their qualities, and their rulers. So sign Cancer, modality cardinal, element water, qualities of the element are cold and wet, and the ruler of the sign is the moon. Okay, so that's how you read that. The signs always go in the same order. Doesn't matter where you start because they always go in the same order. Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sag, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, Aries, Taurus, Gemini. The modalities always go in the same order. Cardinal, fixed, mutable, cardinal, fixed, mutable, cardinal, fixed, mutable, cardinal, fixed, mutable. The elements always go in the same order. Water, fire, earth, air, water, fire, earth, air, fire, earth, air, water, whatever. And then the qualities are going to shift based on which element it is. Now there are different quality systems that assign air as, I believe, wet and cold, and there's variations. So again, you're going to work with what you find, and then when you learn more, if it works better for you, you're going to switch. That's just how learning astrology goes. And then the traditional ruler of each sign. So moon rules Cancer, sun rules Leo, Mercury rules Virgo and Gemini, Venus rules Taurus and Libra, Mars rules Scorpio and Aries, Jupiter rules Pisces and Sag, and Saturn rules Capricorn and Aquarius. I will have a link to a video, but let's just watch it now. Okay, what do I want? I want the Thema Mundi snippet. Yeah? Okay, so we're gonna speed that up. Talking about the Thema Mundi, I'll put this link will be in the video, but Moon rules Cancer, Sun rules Leo. These are two halves of a whole, like the light in the sky, life, information. It's too big, so we need to split it into like a daytime and a nighttime. We need to give it some nuance. And then that is mirrored through all the planets. Each planet has a daytime, or an active, or an extroverted expression, and each planet has a nighttime, or a receptive, or like an introverted expression. And then this diagram here, the Thema Mundi, and the layout of planets in sign rulership also give us the aspects. So when we say Saturn has the aspect of an opposition, or an opposition is of Saturn, it's because Saturn is in opposition to the luminaries. And Jupiter is of a trine, or trines are of Jupiter, because Jupiter trines each of the luminaries. So that is the basics of that. Alright, that is the circle chart version of this rulership scheme, right? And you can see how that symmetry plays out. Now we have to look at modality, because we've got a really basic sense here. We want to look more closely into signs. Signs are made up of modalities and elements, so let's look more closely at modality. Modality is also called quadruplicity because there are groups of 4. There's 4 signs per modality. Modality describes the underlying seasonal energy. So cardinal sign starts the season. The March equinox sets 0 degrees Aries. The June solstice sets 0 degrees Cancer. The September equinox sets 0 degrees Libra. And the December solstice sets 0 degrees Capricorn. This is different if you're using non-tropical astrology, like if you're using sidereal astrology or the sidereal zodiac, it's different. So this is what tropical astrology is. It is saying that the planet is in a certain fixed, regular relationship with the sun, and that says something about the energy and the time that we move through. Cardinal signs begin things, they don't have staying power. The spark and the need to act, to care, to speak, and to do happens now. These are cardinal qualities. So, cardinal keywords are initiatory, begins, starts, introduces, initiates, leader, inventor, energy bursts, the energy to get started, the force to break new ground, new challenges, fresh starts. Fixed follows the cardinal sign. Fixed is like the heart of the season. So the idea that it's the beginning of winter is separate from we're in winter. The idea of, spring has sprung is separate from pollen floating through the air, right? A fixed sign, uh, Fixed keywords are status quo, continuation, steady, stubborn, keeps it going, makes it work long term, not a starter. Instead of starting power, we have staying power. Managerial, maintains, endurance, resilience, routine, stability, security. I would also add depth and investigation. Fixed signs kind of have the time and the energy to get to the bottom of stuff or to fixate on things. Fixed signs continue the season are the heart of the season. You might say finally real season is here instead of the start stop of a cardinal initiation. Fixity denotes stubbornness, routine, and immovable structure. There is no hoping for snow in summer. Leo season is relentlessly Leo season. Aquarius season is relentlessly Aquarius season. Fixed signs can manage and maintain or sustain the initiatory actions begun in cardinal signs. Mutable signs are the transition between maintaining what is and starting something new. So like that last 10% of a project that like never really seems to get finished, that's mutable, okay? Mutable signs catch what falls through the cardinal and fixed cracks. Mutable energy doesn't have the drive of cardinal or the staying power of fixed, but has the flexibility to multitask, change direction, and contain contradiction. Mutable signs are adaptable Mutable signs are adaptable and like/need to shake things up. Mutable energy helps clear the way for new cardinal energy. It may not help clear the way so much as like distract you with like smoke fog or like, isn't this cool? Like, let's talk about these things. And then something new is started and now you're in that new energy. Okay? The mutable is the time between. Keywords for immutable are change, flexible, adaptable, transitory, the in between, done with the old, not yet time for the new, the flow of reality, adapting to needs as they arise, multitasking, many interests, variety. And so that's the basics of modality. You need to understand like what does cardinal mean? What is a cardinal sign? What do they care about? What are some keywords for cardinal? What's the basic idea of fixed? What's the basic idea of mutable? And now you have this whole column down because it's cardinal, fixed, mutable. So that's one part of understanding a sign. Another part of understanding a sign is the element. And it's not just looking at, what is water, what is fire. This itself gets broken down into qualities, which can also be called temperament. So our elements, fire, earth, air, and water, are also called triplicity as there are groups of three, or three signs to each element, one of each modality, right? All elements are made up of combining two basic qualities, hot or cold, with wet or dry. The qualities of hot or cold and wet or dry can be summarized here. I've got bigger versions of this in the other thing, so we'll go there. And so we're going to break that down a little bit. But who else has these qualities? The planets themselves have these qualities. So just as you want to look at the qualities to investigate what does a sign really mean? What is this energy? What is this expression? Each of the planets themselves have these qualities as well. And so you want to learn kind of the basics of the qualities the way you learn the basics of modality so that you can combine them into not only the signs with modality but into the planets, which will then be added into the signs because they rule or interact differently with each of the signs. So I won't go over this right now, but here's information about the basic qualities, temperament, the basic temperament of each planet. And you have a temperament as well. You can do calculations to figure out what your natural personality or natural natal temperament is. Okay? So we're not going to put it together. We're going to go over here. All right, so of the qualities, we've got cold. Cold absorbs. Cold bodies need energy. Cold needs something to react to and like a threshold limit, okay? Cold is also, if you use like a gendered expression, cold is more feminine and hot is more masculine. I don't really use that. Instead, I like to think of it as lunar or responsive. Cold is moistening. So where does the wet quality comes from? It's a result of this key cold polarity. So I have this image here. You can I think of like lizards, like cold-blooded animals that need like heat lamps and they need like hot food in order to have the energy to move through the world. Versus comparatively, things like humans, we're exotherms. We produce our own heat. We have it in us. We're little engines. We don't, yes, we need food to like fuel that, but we don't have to sit under a heat lamp in order to be able to move like a lizard or an ant. We can get our own energy up. We can heat ourselves up and then we can keep that going. So hot has something to share and it pushes it outward. This heat is what heats up, a cold body so that they have the energy to move. A cold temperament might walk into the room and kind of suss out what's going on before they make their move, before they decide how they're going to show up, really. Whereas a hot temperament is going to walk into the room as themselves and set the energy there, unless there's a whole bunch of cold in the room soaking it all up and they just, peter out of all that heat immediately. Okay? So cold is more slow and inward and passive because it takes time for this to like build up, whereas heat is fast. It's already there, it's already out, it's already dissipating. The dry quality to me is like particle theory. Is it here or is it there? It's either this side of the door or it's outside the door. We can measure it. Where is it? What is it? Define it. Give me a thing to hold up and consider. Dry is one, individual, discrete, particle, solo, detached, barren, disconnected, like the dry earth. How do you get life out of a dry earth? You have to add water, right? So without that moisture, it just is by itself. A pile of dry leaves is just a pile of dry leaves. If you add moisture to it, now it's going to start composting. It's going to smell rotty. It's going to get slimy. But without that, it's just what it is. Okay, so this is my little symbol for dry. I'll draw a circle with a little circle around it to be like a particle of dirt, a grain of sand, a electron, a one thing. Whereas the wet quality is we're going to go back to my grade 9 science class where we learned about trees, and there's the material in a tree, the phylum, which goes up, like phlegm comes up, and the xylem, which goes down, like X is at the bottom, okay? So the material that transports the moisture and the nutrients and the sugars around the tree are the phylum and the xylem. And water comes up through the roots and up the phylum, and it's able to do that because water is both cohesive and adhesive. Water will adhere to the wall of the tree, the wall of the bark, your window pane, which is vertical. It will adhere to the shower wall, and then it will cohere to other water droplets. So they're able to create this little chain that walks up the inside of the tree, assisted by whatever mechanism like the tree has. But it's because water is able to not only adhere to things but cohere amongst itself. So there's like a very sticky kind of like amoeba quality to the wet quality, where as soon as you make contact, now you're part of the whole group and indistinguishable from the rest of the group. Once a water droplet adds into the puddle, you can't get that droplet out. It doesn't exist anymore. It's now the puddle. You can take a droplet out, but like it's not going to be that. droplet. Even if you put one drop of ink into a puddle, it's going to swiftly disperse. You might be able to get a lot of ink out or most of the ink out in a drop, but it's not going to be the same, okay? Because as soon as they come together, it's communal and it coheres. There's a cohesiveness, like an amoeba-ness to it. So we can think of wet as all collective, more wave theory than particle theory. Is it on this side of the door or that side of the door? Well, it's all of it. It's on that side of the door and it's passing through the doorway and it's on this side of the door. It's a lot of things. It's not, I can't give you just one discrete, here it is every time, guaranteed. It's going to shift. It has a more collective identity to it. It's communal, and then wet is fertile and fecund, right? You get like a steamy jungle, that's going to come from wet and hot, right? The things that give us life. So a wet temperament might wake up every morning and go, every day is accumulation of every day that came before it, and I can't just have like a fresh morning because I've got all my memories and I have my experiences and I have my fascia, and it's just the accumulation of my whole life and all of the history of the world before me is here in this moment with me at all times. Whereas a dry temperament might wake up and every day is a brand new day and a fresh start, and there's no need to think about the past because here we are now. I have like a cooking analogy. So a wet temperament may be in the kitchen and find a recipe from an old friend they don't have anymore for whatever circumstance, and like not be able to make that recipe. It's too emotional. And if they did make it, they like wept the whole time. And if they did eat it, it was ash in their mouth because there's just so much attached to it. It's that stickiness of the wet quality. There's emotions attached to it and memories and meaning, and oh, they're not here to share it with me forever for whatever reason. Whereas a dry temperament might just, oh yeah, I have this great recipe. And if someone were to ask them, like, where'd you learn this? They might have to think about, like, oh, well, I knew this person one time, and well, I guess I don't talk to them anymore. Like, it's a separate thing than I have this recipe and it's good. Now, in my original joke aside from me to you, in my little original skit for this in my mind, was that this person just couldn't even bear to look at the rest. Couldn't make it, ash in their mouth. Whereas the dry person would make it and be like, thanks for the memories. That song by Fallout Boy. So it's like, thanks for the recipe. Even though it's so good, it tastes like yours, but better. Whereas, like, I actually don't think that would be a dry personality. I feel like that would be a wet personality with some heat in it, or maybe, well placed Mars or Venus for like a little bit of vindictiveness. So anyway, that's how I kind of try and play with primarily cold, hot, dry, and wet temperaments, but all temperaments are combinations of these four. So this is all of them together, and then they become like a matrix. So sanguine temperament, or humor from back in the day, or the combination of hot and wet, is all of the air signs. We consider it the spring season, something getting started, life getting started. The new moon phase in the first crescent, and Jupiter and Venus rising have this sanguine, this hot, wet, fecund, fertile, growing, expansive, something to share with everybody kind of quality. Okay? When we combine cold and dry, this gives us the melancholic humor or temperament. All of the earth signs, the fall season, a full moon into the third quarter, and Saturn and a Mercury setting, these all have the melancholic or cold and dry quality. So they're going to take their time, they're going to consider things, they're going to receive energy with which to react to, and they're going to do it on their terms, in their own time, for their own motivations. Okay? This is the cold and dry Earth Saturn melancholic vibe. We can combine heat and dry. So we're going to have something called choleric, which is hot and dry. It's all the fire signs. The summer season, our first quarter up to almost the full moon. And Sun, Mars, and Mercury rising all are going to have hot and dry quality. So they've got something to share, and they don't need to be bogged down by taking everyone with them. They've got something to share and they're doing it for them. So they're moving through the world as themselves and just shedding heat and light and information. Okay, Sun, Mars, Mercury rising. And then we have our phlegmatic, cold and wet water winter season, third quarter into the balsamic dark moon, and moon and Venus, a setting Venus, and nighttime Venus. Is setting is nighttime and rising is morning. A setting Venus are all going to have this cold and wet quality. So we're going to have the coldness of like that patience, that needing input to react to, not barging in and setting the tone for the room, but being kind of the audience for that tone, as well as caring about the rest of the audience. Okay, so this is where Venus and Moon are both going to get their like very caring, nurturing kind of reputation from, because they're responsive to the needs of the group. Okay? Here that is in a grid in case the lines were all really confusing. So hot and wet is sanguine, hot and dry is choleric, and these are going to be this word sanguine, like you can replace it for air, you can replace it for Jupiter, just the way that air signs, like the idea of air is it's all replacing hot and wet. Like these are the building blocks, these are the atoms, these are the keys of these greater ideas. Cold and wet, water. Cold and dry, earth. Hot and dry, fire. All right, a little break to talk about the planets. So we arrange the planets in this order in our solar system. Okay, so Sun is at the center, Mercury's right there tight against the Sun, then Venus, then us, and our moon. And everybody's got some moons, but we can only really see ours, so we only care about ours. Then Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. So from Earth, and in astrology, the order of the planets appears, because it's all about perspective, it's all about like the light and the visuals of it. Moon, then Mercury, Venus, then Sun, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. And then we have the far planets, which are not really visible to the naked eye. Uranus sometimes is, but then Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. So Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, that's the same. Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, that's the same. The difference is because we're on a path around the sun, it looks like the sun is on a path around us, okay? And then because moon is closest to us, moon is actually going around us, whereas all these other planets are going around the sun, moon is right tight to us. Check out Gemini Brett if you actually want to know what's going on. Okay, so this order is called the Chaldean order, like calendar, and it also reflects the general planetary speed of the planets relative to one another. So moon is going to zoom around the zodiac once every month, the fastest. Mercury goes so fast that he can make 3 stop and starts throughout the year and still be lapping himself every year. And if you're watching, if you're tracking day over day, unless somebody's going retrograde or slowing down, you can see how quickly everybody moves. So this is not only what we call the spheres of the planets, like the lunar sphere, Mercury sphere, and this is the order they go in, but this is their relative speed through the zodiac as well. So it's Moon, Mercury, Venus, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. I cannot find this symbol for Pluto in text online. This is the text version. Nobody uses that. We use this one on the bottom here. Okay, so these planets here are called the traditional planets because they are the ones that we can see with the naked eye. You can see these guys throughout the year depending on visibility and where they are. These guys you need a telescope. Sometimes you can see Uranus, but you need a telescope for these guys. So these guys are the traditional planets. These guys have traditional rulership of the signs, whereas in my opinion, these guys lorded over all of the rest of them, and these planets lorded over us, okay? So these planets are called the traditional planets. And then these planets from Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and the FARs are all called superior planets because they're beyond the sun. So we've got our inferior planets, or our inner planets, and our superior or external planets because they're on the superior side, they're on the outside. These guys are personal planets. The first 5 are the personal planets. Okay, so the first 3 are the inner planets. The first 5 are the personal planets. The first 7 are the traditional planets. The last 7 are the superior planets. Okay? Okay. If you are looking at transits, you want to be looking at, you want to look at the retrogrades for Venus and Mars. You want to look at the last 5 planets for transit and the first 7 planets for progression. Okay? This is the planetary breakdown. So now that we have an idea of what cold and wet is and what hot and dry are, we can begin to piece that together better for what the planets may be bringing to the table. Okay, so we have an idea of modality, we have an idea of the qualities that influence both planetary expression and sign or elemental expression. Here's the recap of modality. Here is a chart with everything laid out in a different way. And now we can get into what is a sign, what is an element. So this is the setup of the question that was asked on Reddit that is inspiring me to actually make this video right now, where they asked, what is Earth? Like, what's the difference between all the Earth signs? They had a basic understanding of what Earth could be, and then wanted a breakdown of like what actually makes these guys similar and different between the Earth signs. And so that's one way to look at it. You're going to look at the element, you're going to have some keywords about what the element means between its qualities, and then you're going to start breaking down each of the signs and what is different about them. Well, it's going to be their modality and then also their rulership, who is ruling each of those planets. Another way to look at it is instead to look at all the cardinal signs. You're going to look at all the cardinal signs, you're going to break those down by element, and then add in the ruler and see what does that tell you about this, like the operation of this energy, the style of this action in the world. How does this come together? So there's many ways you can look at it, and then finally you can look at, like, you can look at it from the point of view of the planet. So once you're considering, let's say, Saturn, and you know about cold and dry, and you have an idea about the planets that Saturn rules, which is Capricorn and Aquarius, and the sign that Saturn rules, Capricorn, Aquarius, and the sign that Saturn has its exaltation in, which is Libra. And then you can start to figure out, okay, how does Saturn have, an extroverted or a diurnal or a solar or a more outgoing or a more active expression in Aquarius versus how does Saturn exhibit a more nocturnal, lunar, receptive, reactive, a slower, more patient mode of expression in Capricorn. And so you can look at it from any point, and you need to look at it from every point to get a really holistic view of everything. So you do want to look at it from, we're not doing that right now, we do want to look at it from Saturn and say, okay, how does Saturn exist in every sign, but particularly in the signs of its rulership, exaltation, and then fall and detriment. You want to look at it from the point of view of the modality and then break that into the different elements per modality. You want to look at the element itself and break those into modality, thus giving us the name of each sign. Whereas again, like the name Aquarius, in my opinion, is essentially just shorthand for fixed air. And air itself is shorthand for hot wet. So Aquarius, instead of saying the fixed hot wet sign, and instead of saying the fixed air sign, we say Aquarius. So to me, that's like the summation of a sign, is all these little bits, and then it becomes a shorthand, which is what makes, like, which is why astrology was part of why it was a science, because in science you have like a little equation, like force equals mass times acceleration. Force is at least a paragraph explanation, mass is at least a paragraph and several other calculations, and then acceleration is like you need you need at least 3 layers of calculations to explain what acceleration is. And so it's a really, really shorthand that you need to understand the jargon to. You need to understand all those parts before you even can begin to break down or interpret the equation itself. So I hope that made any sense. Well, let's go through the signs. So fire signs, as we talked about, are part of hot and dry, which means they're choleric. They have the summer season. They represent first quarter to the gibbous moon, and planets that are exhibiting this hot, dry quality or kind of act fiery: Sun, Mars, and a rising Mercury or a morning Mercury. Fire, we can just look at fire culturally. What are some words, what are some ideas that we already kind of just have in our minds about fire? We don't have to look at all this right now. Just what does fire mean to you? Energy, life, spirit, fuel. Fires need fuel. So they're consuming. They're indiscriminate in what they consume. They'll just burn up anything. Fire, we talk about like vitality, like the fire of life, the spark of life. Creativity, passion, spark, heat, life rises up. Fire and heat rises. So this itself is fine. You can just use these, kind of generic cultural, I don't know, literary ideas that you may have about fire, and you can run with it. That's fine. You can go with it. If you want to break it down further, we can remember that fire is actually representation of the hot and the dry quality. We can remember that hot qualities are outward, they're giving, they're sharing, they're dispersing, they're exuding, they're coming out of the body, they're assertive, they denote action, they're fast, they're using and like thus sharing energy, it's energy going out. And then the dry quality is discrete, solo, individual, it's unconnected, it's barren, it's material instead of a more conceptual or emotional, it's separate, it's detached, it's itself, it is defined, it's a grain of sand. So, how do we combine all of this into Aries? Well, Aries is the cardinal sign, so we're going to have our cardinal words: initiatory, begins, starts, introduces, initiates, leader, inventor, energy burst, the energy to get started, the force to break new ground, new challenges, fresh starts, and then we add into that ruled by Mars: action, individuality, separateness, and me first. Now, we haven't gone over Mars, so why would you take my word for it that those are Mars words? Again, you've got to get each part, and you get it a little bit, and then you go through the whole system, and then you get it a little bit more, and so it takes time. It takes a while, and that's okay. And so the real difference between these fire signs is going to be the modality: who's starting something, who's managing something, and who's, like, I don't know, burning up the vestiges, just going through the ends, and then what are they ruled by, and how does that influence our greater idea of each sign. I'm not going to go through all of these. You can just read them as you like. It's just like copy pasted from each section. The only thing that's new is going to be the little blurbs I have about the planets, and like planets are their own thing to get into at some other time with more time. In the Reddit post, I had mentioned both breaking down the glyph as another layer of meaning, as well as kind of some like imagery for each one that I was using. So, like, Capricorn is the sea goat, and I didn't write this in the post because it was too long, but I read about this, like, now extinct kind of little tiny pygmy goat that lived on a Mediterranean island, and it grew like an alligator or a crocodile or whatever, which means that there was very scarce nutrition and scarce resources, and so it would just kind of level out and plateau in its growth and like not grow or develop until there were resources, and then it would eat, and then it would grow, and then it would plateau, and it would just kind of sustain itself and not get bigger or whatever until there was something to eat, and then it would grow. And so to me, that is the inspiration for the sea goat. That's where it came from. But if we're thinking about, like, poetically, a sea goat, something that can live both in the bottom of the ocean and get to the very top of the mountain, as just like a goat, you gotta be really efficient. So you're not going to bring all the baggage with you, which is where we're getting this dry quality for Capricorn. And then Saturn is about, like, kind of saying no and limits and boundaries. And Saturn really rules like time and legacy. Saturn has the longest transit of any of the traditional planets, and so that's one of the reasons he rules time, is because he just took the longest out of anybody to make a lap, which is like pretty much averages out to 30 years. To me, Capricorn is about planning, because if you have a big project, people talk culturally and in modern astrology about Capricorn being like the boss bitch, and like being kind of like cutthroat and like really business savvy. And I have 5 planets in Capricorn, and you can almost not pay me to work. And so to me, Capricorn is more about planning. If you're making big moves, you need a big plan. You don't just go into it. You do when it's time, but you spend all of your energy making like a foolproof business plan. That is what Saturn wants. He wants the receipts. He wants a business plan. He wants to know what the plan is. Go ahead and do it. As long as you have a plan, of course it's going to get done. What is the plan? Capricorn is like a monument of nature. Cardinal signs are like a monument of nature. So I'll talk about that separately. Taurus's glyph is this bull symbol, and bulls are stubborn, and you are not going to like negotiate. You're not gonna bully a bull. Okay, a bull's gonna bully you, and then take extra long just to rub it in your face. The bull is also, I think, like you think about like the eyelashes on a cow, just gorgeous, right? A well cared for like family bull, pampered lifestyle. You know what I mean? Like a nice home cow. I don't know what I'm saying here. I'm not gonna keep going with that. Libra is not only the scales, but this is like the yoke that you put on a bull when you're going to yoke a cart to Venus's other sign, Taurus. Like when you're going to join two things together to move as one, this is the symbol of a yoke. So this will go behind their head, and then this goes against the chest, and they push against it to pull the cart behind them. Looking at things from a modality perspective, and we split it into each element, and then we consider not only what the element pieces are, but the planetary pieces are. We can ask the question of how does Mars want to initiate cardinal with fire energy, right? Because if these are all the same, if they're all cardinal signs, they all want to start something. Okay, who wants to start something with fire? Who wants to start something with earth? Who wants to start something with air? And who wants to start something with moon? This is going to tell you something not only about the signs, but about the planets themselves, okay? We can do that for all of them. So you can look through this at your leisure. When looking at the signs, I like to use this imagery where I associate cardinal signs to like kind of monuments of earth. You can't really negotiate with these things. They're just going to be there. Fixed with something that humans have cultivated or that they're working, they're managing, they're building with long term. And then mutable is when we really put the human spirit into something. We really get our hands into it. It's no longer working with the earth, it's having, or whatever element, it's having it work for us. So, for example, for earth, the cardinal earth is like a mountain or an earthquake, some earth structure or event that like we just have to work around. And then a fixed earth is something we're cultivating, like farms and agriculture and pastures of animals. And then mutable earth is something we've really got our hands onto. So I think of pottery. We have changed its form and its function, and we've made it serve us now in a way that becomes almost disposable, but also incredibly artistic. For fire signs, Aries is like the sun or like a fire ripping through, the landscape. It's you got to run from it. You've got to work around it. And there's so much power in that. Like thank goodness it's not constant. And then Leo is a fixed, nurtured, a fed fire. So like the hearth fire, what sustains you? What do you have to sustain so that it sustains you? So a hearth fire.